Welcome to the afternoon session here at the Royal Television Society. This session is called A Traveller's Guide to the Metaverse. My name is Mark Chislak. I'm the BBC's technology correspondent. I report across all of the news output, including the main bulletins at 1, 6 and 10. I've occasionally been heard on Radio 4 Today programme and Radio 5 Live, and I also present on Click, which is the BBC's weekly technology television programme. Now, in the last few years, I've reported about a growing trend in immersive technology called the Metaverse, what it means to our audiences, how it's going to change their lives, how they're going to interact with the internet as a result of this.
Yeah, but you had help.
I beg your pardon?
You had help for the likes of me, the trimmer, younger-looking virtual version of you that has helped with all of these stories on the telly.
Well, if you know so much about the Metaverse, perhaps you can explain to our audience what it actually is.
My pleasure. If we think of the current internet as something that we look at, the Metaverse is the next version of the net that we're inside, experiencing as a 3D avatar like this one. That's the broad idea. It doesn't truly exist yet. But games like Fortnite and Roblox offer us a glimpse of what the Metaverse could be. Virtual realms which play host to pop concerts, fashion shows and sports. As well as allowing us to play games and matching up different activities across genres and industries. The promise of the Metaverse is twofold. It offers increased immersion and engagement for audiences, but there are also financial incentives for businesses. People will be and are purchasing digital goods using real money. And there's an enormous amount of data and insight to be gathered from users, customers, or audiences. So I think that leaves us with plenty to think about and discuss. I'll hand back to analog Mark now, back in the real world.
He is an absolute nightmare to work with, that guy, always leaving his stuff lying around, constantly complaining that he needs more hard drive space. To explore and unpack some of the ideas that we saw in that film, we've assembled an incredible panel of professional pioneers that I'd like to introduce to you now. Our very first panellist is Vicky Dobbs-Beck, who's Vice President of Immersive Content at Lucasfilm and ILM's XLab. Next up, we have a person who shares the same professional postcode as me, W1A. It's Jatin Athora, who is Director of Research and Development at the BBC. And finally, from the world of video games, he's CEO and co-founder of a company which is building a virtual world that's so massive it can accommodate thousands of players all at once. Mundi Vondi, who is CEO of Clan Games. Please welcome all of our panellists. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's dive straight in, shall we? Vicky, you've been at the forefront of storytelling, developing technologies in mediums like augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, a lot of realities there, for major franchises that I'm fairly confident most people in this room will have heard of, Star Wars and things like that. What does the Metaverse mean to you?
So interestingly, we actually don't use the term metaverse a lot because it means different things to different people. So what we often talk about is next generation storytelling. And for us, that is connected, cross-platform storytelling. And kind of we approach it with a holistic creative vision. And then our goal is if you experience multiple experiences in this space, that the whole is truly greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay. Now, Jatin, you're obviously a very keen observer of the tech landscape, and you're responsible for the BBC's research and development efforts. What do you think when you hear the term metaverse?
Virtual world. I think that's what it is. Metaverse is one way of saying that we are going to be operating on digital and internet platforms that provide interactions, two-way interactions, but not so virtual world. That's what we mean.
Yeah. Now, Mundi, you obviously work in video games. Is the notion of the metaverse, does it draw some of its inspiration from video games?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think like this term is very divisive. It's like you said, like some people see it as one thing, and what I think about is like what is the actual evolution of what we have today? Because you, for example, mentioned Fortnite as an example. Fortnite is a game, like 100%. And so what's the difference like that we're looking for when we want to see the space evolve from being a computer game to something more novel or more futuristic in this sense? And so I think it's a matter of basically one element, which is interoperability, that you can take items from one experience to another. Of course, that's a huge marketing opportunity. Another is the sheer amount of people connected in a single experience. The technology is finally enabling us to connect, thousands, if not millions of people into a single universe. That's never been possible in the past. And so, yeah, so those are the kind of things that there are some more things that I can see the Metaverse being, but as soon as we start to see those things, I think we're moving forward with basically a gaming space. These are still games. Everything we've seen in the Metaverse has already been done in games. So it's an evolution of games, in my opinion.
Okay. Now, do you think that the notion of the Metaverse unlocks new sorts of content and new creative processes?
I definitely do, and sort of the three themes that I see when we talk about the Metaverse. One is connected storytelling. So that's actually our history. We've done that across Lucasfilm, across Disney, and so forth. The second, which is very current, is immersive, and that is enabling these using these new kinds of technologies like virtual and augmented and mixed reality to allow people to step inside our stories in new and different ways. And the third, and I think this is something that Mundi's sort of getting at, is that I think the big trend for the future is this sense of community. And but with all of those immersive platforms, these are new storytelling canvases. And if I could say one thing to people exploring, thinking about this space is you have to be willing to experiment, because it's like being at the beginning of television or the beginning of film, when we're just learning what is really fun, what is compelling, what has an emotional impact. So it is a new form of storytelling.
Because we're thinking about entirely different ways of telling stories, really. We understand linear storytelling, we understand lean-back storytelling, and to some extent we have a bit of we're clued into lean forward when you have interactive entertainment, but this is a different opportunity.
And it's really also kind of finding that balance, because one of the things that we think a lot about at Lucasfilm is how do you balance the curated content, the curated storytelling, with inviting people to participate in that world in a way that preserves the integrity of the story and the story world, and yet still gives you meaningful opportunity to engage.
Now, Justin, the BBC is always keen to experiment with new ways of telling stories. Is the BBC experimenting with virtual worlds and ways it can tell stories?
Yeah, so this is interesting, right? So we've been following this trend for some time. I mean, I was just explaining earlier that back in 2004, we were experimenting with digital twins and what a digital world would look like. It's fascinating to see how the technology is mature, and the things that we were hoping we could do back in 2004, we can do them now, which is fantastic. It definitely gives us the opportunity to look at different ways of engaging our audiences, but also deliver the public service that we care about deeply, which we deliver amazingly through the mediums that we have access to. But going forward, making sure that our experiences and public services are also relevant in these new ecosystems is going to matter quite a lot. From a technology point of view, I think we have certainly experimented with many of these different capabilities, be it AR, VR, and now just exploring how we can bring some of our live events into these virtual worlds where we can not only improve interaction, but give an immersive experience of some of our content, which, by the way, is amazing quality.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about, because, look at BBC IP, we have things like Doctor Who. There's been Doctor Who crossovers in the video game Fortnite, but there's an awful lot of shows on the BBC. Things like Strictly are some of the biggest programs. Is there an opportunity to do some kind of crossovers with those really big brands?
Certainly. At the moment, we observe that most of these virtual worlds are created and the stories are created within these virtual worlds. There are very few examples where live events like Strictly Come Dancing and others are brought into these virtual worlds, either through streaming into these virtual worlds or building experiences around them. That's where I think we, as BBC, are exploring what can we do to bridge that gap, because I don't think that maturity exists in that space for us to bring that production live event into these virtual worlds. And certainly is an interest, because I think apart from continuing to deliver those experiences into these virtual worlds, there is an opportunity to build communities, as we were discussing earlier, and actually create more interactions that are not really possible through physical live events.
Mundi, how does this notion, if you like, of the metaverse or the expanded virtual worlds, how do you think it changes storytelling?
Storytelling. Well, I do think a big part of if we go back to my earlier point about connecting more people together, there's lots of problems that come with that that we know from the games industry, and one of them is certainly the sheer amount of content that you need to produce as a game developer to feed, let's say, 1 million people. Imagine a theme park and there's 1 million people inside. Like, all the rides are going to be crowded. There's going to be very long lines everywhere. And so how to solve for that problem becomes a matter of how do you get actually the users or the players to start producing the content itself, commonly known as user-generated content. And so I think, the evolution of the metaverse is very centered around the kind of the tool set that you provide the users with, so that they can start creating small experiences for one another. That's where you get this kind of explosive emergence that we've seen in the web too, right? Like, if you look at any social network, right, it's not the actual social network itself that fuels the engagement. It's the users that are putting content onto the social network. And so that's the true network effect. So the more users, the more content, and then it fuels itself forward like that. I think Roblox is probably a better example of a metaverse-like game, because that's a user-generated content style game. Still very sharded, but yeah. So I think what we're going to be seeing in terms of story is those very emergent stories that are unpredictable and interesting for that matter, because everybody's experience is going to be completely unique.
Vicky, do you think that content creators are going to have to relinquish a degree of control if there's a greater degree of user-generated content sort of appearing in these spaces?
Well, this is really what I was just referencing a minute ago, is I think for us, it's really trying to strike the right balance. I do think it's going to be essential to invite users into the creation process, but I still believe that people want, they really value stories told by master storytellers. So I think what we have to consider is how to do both. And that's part of the experimentation process. To this date, we've done mostly curated immersive experiences. The visitors can't really fundamentally change the world, but we've tried to give a sense of that you are at the center of the journey, and that your choices do matter. So that's, I think, one of the fundamental themes we're going to see for the future is choice does matter, and it needs to be meaningful for people to engage over time.
Okay, let's talk money. Let's get straight to the dirty word of money. Now, a lot of the sort of proto-metaverse experiences involve cold hard cash or cryptocurrencies in some respect, through the sale of virtual goods. Does that mean that virtual worlds represent a sort of gold mine opportunity, or is this closer to some kind of technological version of the emperor's new clothes, because we're talking about ephemeral goods that don't have any real tangibility to them?
Well, I mean, if you watch kids, they feel that digital goods have value.
Yeah.
and they spend their, their allowances on digital goods. So it's a slightly abstract concept for someone my age, but I watch children, and so the two things I see is, yes, they believe that those have perhaps as much value as physical goods. And then secondly, they want to have, as I was mentioning a minute ago, a role in the world. They want to engage directly with the content. And I think that's a really important thing to consider as we look out, say 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Now, Monday, microtransactions and things like that, they're kind of the oil that fuels certain sectors of the industry, aren't they? So what do you think about virtual goods and their value?
Yeah, I mean, I think to start off with, I mean, I don't think we realize the sheer amount of virtual goods that we're already trading.
Yeah, a lot.
Like we talk about kids, but like in reality, Netflix is a virtual good, right? Even though it's done in a physical format in the first place, it's, you're paying for a digital product to download onto your TV. Spotify the same, right? YouTube, like a lot of goods are virtual.
So when you widen that lens, it starts to, the landscape starts to shift ever so slightly.
Yeah,
it's not just new hats in Call of Duty.
No, I think it's just a continuous evolution. I don't think that it'll come as a shock to anyone. I think, a lot of the rhetoric currently surrounding the metaverse is that, it's coming, don't miss the train, like it's gonna blow up in your face. I don't think it's going to be anything like that, right? It seeps in slowly over time. More and more of your purchases become virtual over time. You may be using video calls more. You may be buying premium services of, digital products more and more. And before you know it, you're spending more money on virtual goods than you are doing on physical goods. I mean, the possibility of a virtual good is, of course, purely virtual, so you think about it differently than you do like physical things, because we feel like, oh yeah, if I can touch it, it's real. But I think that perception is gonna slowly fade away, and it already is, and it's not gonna be something that goes from 0 to 1 or black to white. Like it'll basically slowly become very normal, and it already is in a way.
Okay, now, Jatin, broadcasters were really, really late to exploiting their content online and waking up to social and all those kind of things, and that's across the board. That's absolutely everybody was caught napping on that one. It took broadcasters years to wake up to the power of mobile and social media. Is there an opportunity here for broadcasters to be at the ground floor of an entirely new thing, a paradigm shift?
This is interesting, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely. I think the Web 2, as we call it, definitely we missed that boat a little bit. But I think the underlying things that are happening behind the scenes certainly are quite useful for us. I think there's an element of thinking about how some of these technology maturity can help us inject public value and introduce educational content and more news content into that ecosystem. I don't think personally we are late. I think we've been observing it. I think it fundamentally boils down to whether broadcasters continue to be one-to-many content provider, or should they become an interactive content provider. I think that's what this boils down to. In terms of the technology, I think we've been observing this maturity, and we can offer all of those things. However, there is an important angle around trust and providing trusted content into these ecosystems, and hence I still believe one-to-many relationship still needs to exist. However, there are other areas for the broadcasters to explore in this new ecosystem that we haven't yet thought about.
I mean, the BBC was very early into the streaming space, for
Totally.
instance, wasn't it? When Netflix was still sending out DVDs, the BBC had iPlayer.
Yeah, and when iPhones were launched back in 2007, that's when we came out with iPlayer. Now, since then, we've been working with the industry in making sure that the standards and the technologies that are developed are accessible to all. And I think that is quite fundamental with this next iteration of evolution in technology space. If it becomes a closed ecosystem, it will be really, really difficult for the broadcasters and organizations who carry quite a lot of public service dimension to it to be relevant in these ecosystems. So we are working hard behind the scenes with these standards bodies and technology organizations to make sure that there is space for public service in these ecosystems.
Vicky, how does some of the technology that you've developed at ILM and some of the methodologies that you developed at ILM XLab, how are they feeding into the wider industry? Not just in broadcasting, but in entertainment in general, because obviously across transmedia, you've got everything there: theme parks, video games, TV shows, movies.
Well, when we embarked on our first big project was Vader Immortal, which was a virtual reality 3-part episodic story series. And when we embarked upon that, we essentially had to innovate on virtually every level, on production, on development, on the business model, et cetera. But we sort of started by saying, okay, it's not a film, it's not a game, it's not an attraction, but we have experience in all of these forms of entertainment. So how can we draw the best from each of these and produce something that is wholly unique? One of the things we also try to do is sort of live at the intersection of immersive narrative and technology innovation. So in order to bring our creative vision to life, we've certainly had to innovate from a technology perspective. And then at the same time, the industry overall is also evolving. So I think that the technology story is, while we've made our own innovations, I think it's actually that bigger industry story that really sort of paves the way for the future.
Okay. Do you think that there's a barrier to entry to getting into this space? The artist formerly known as Facebook, which is now Meta, it's rumored that they've spent something in the region of $10 billion invested in research, in metaverse research. I mean, these are big numbers that are being bandied around. So do you think that there is a barrier to entry for indie studios and even for big studios? Bundy?
Yeah, so I think there, it depends on what shelf you're kind of going into. I think the play that Meta is doing is to try to capture the platform play, which is, be the kind of the lobby for all other experiences to connect into. For sure, that's going to be quite challenging and expensive, may not work even. Then you'll have, people that are kind of like what Nike is doing with Roblox, building a Nike store inside the Roblox universe. Like, that's not expensive at all. They've made a bunch of money. So I think, it really depends on what is the level of ambition, so to speak. I think there are probably, going to be a couple of platforms that will come and go, and one will ultimately be the one, but it's also going to be many interlinked platforms. And one thing I want to add from earlier point, I think the monetary incentive here connected with user-generated content is really important to understand, because once you start to get that kind of monetary incentive for the users, so they really now make money of creating content. That's a big leap from what we see today. You post stuff, you do free content for those platforms all the time. Okay. But once connected to a real value, that's where the theory is that you'll see this really grand explosion.
Okay, Jatin, do you think that there is a barrier to entry then, especially for an organisation like the BBC? It's got to do a lot of things, more than any other broadcast organisation.
Certainly there is at the moment. I think if we continue with the notion of having AR and VR kind of devices with us, in order for us to experience these virtual worlds, it's limited. It's obviously based upon affordability and obviously the type of experiences that you deliver. We certainly believe in universality, and it's important for us to be able to reach our audiences wherever they are. So, if these devices suddenly become quite cheap and accessible, absolutely yes. But at the moment, as we stand, it is not affordable for all to have those kind of devices to experience these virtual worlds.
I think it was Walt Disney's chief, Bob Chapek, that said the metaverse will create entirely new paradigms for how audiences experience and engage with their stories. Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, calls it the next frontier. Are executives sitting in boardrooms saying to one another, what are we going to do about the metaverse? Should we be involved? Are those conversations happening? I don't often sit in boardrooms. The closest I get to it is watching Succession, and I think you guys might be a bit closer than I am. But are those conversations happening?
Well, I don't sit in boardrooms either, but I do think that the Walt Disney Company sees this as a very significant opportunity. And I think we are trying to understand, and certainly ILM XLab and Lucasfilm are hoping to lead that effort along with Marvel and others, in what does that mean for the Walt Disney Company, right? And for us, I think we're trying to transcend the physical, digital, and virtual worlds, which is a little bit different because of the kind of ecosystem that we have, which is inclusive of the theme parks. So I think our version of the metaverse and the associated strategy may be different than others, but I mean, I just know from what I read, the people I talk to, that this is something people are really trying to understand what it means for their company and what kind of creative opportunities it opens up.
Jatin, does that happen at the BBC?
Yeah, I mean, I don't sit at the boardroom as well, but I do observe that this has become a discussion point for many teams within BBC, but also outside as we work with many standards organizations. People are trying to understand what this really means. I think every business and every organization will have a different perspective on this. Certainly for us, there is an opportunity, which is, I think, about education. Again, going back to the point about the opportunity with kids and what we could offer for them to be able to learn about the things and the challenges that this world faces. There is definitely an opportunity to improve engagement and awareness and education through this medium. Everything else is still up for debate.
Mundi, part and parcel of some of these experiences, and part and parcel of the sort of a lot of video games experiences, is the ability to be whoever you want to be, to behave however you want to behave. How does that freedom impact on online communities?
Well, I mean, I would argue that that's been a possibility for a really long time. So we've already seen what that does, remarkably little. So yeah, I don't see that as a new invention at all. You have tons of online communities today. Things like, I would probably say VR chat is a good example of something that is often referred to as the metaverse today. People can, pretty much dress up. But even when I was growing up as a kid, you could go on online games and play some weird character. I mean, that I think. That kind of freedom, I think, is quite freeing for kids, as they are, quite insecure often. They haven't really figured out who they want to be or who they are, and they can go into these virtual worlds and kind of be whoever they, be a hero or something like that, and be perceived very differently. I think there are going to be kind of enhancements, I think, coming along with this more and more, with changing your voice and like basically changing the way you. Because now, like, if there's a lot of harassment online, and girls in video games are especially vulnerable to that, because it's a very male-dominated form of entertainment today. And so when you're a woman and you speak on the team chat, everybody is like, these horrible.
What do you think about online identity and those communities?
Well, I do think the idea of an identity that transcends experiences, so that's where I get back to the connected experience, so your identity could travel with you, whether you're doing it in virtual reality or in a console game, or maybe when you go to the theme park, et cetera. I think that there is opportunity there, and as with anything, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, but I think that as creators, we really want to try to develop inclusive and diverse worlds so that people actually have a sense of belonging. And sort of building on what Mundi was saying, it is a very male-dominated industry, even from a creation perspective. I'm oftentimes the only woman in a room of 12 or 15 men. And so I think we have to make a really concerted effort to both broaden the talent pool to be much more diverse, and by extension, then, I think that's also going to broaden the kind of content that is being created.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Now, you don't need to be in the metaverse or a virtual world experience to be whoever you want to be. Meta has recently embarked on what it's calling the world's first metaverse drag show. Called Queens of the Metaverse, it features real-world drag queens wearing outfits which are enhanced by augmented reality. We're very lucky because we have one of the outfits that was involved in this show available to show you now, which is being modelled fabulously. And we're also incredibly lucky because the designer of this incredible creation, Noara Emenike, is also with us. Hello. 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 This dress exists physically and it exists digitally. Here is a bit of an opportunity for some audience interaction, audience participation, if you like. So, if you've got a smartphone, which I'm fairly confident most of you have got a smartphone in your pocket, if you take it out, on screen now you'll see that we have a QR code up. Open up the camera, click on that QR code, and then, if you've got Instagram installed on your phone, when you point your phone at our fabulous model, the dress will come to life, enhanced by augmented reality. Now, you're going to get the full catwalk front row experience because our model is now going to move amongst you. So I invite you all to take some snaps, have a look, and see how this dress looks in augmented reality. Noara. Hello. What was it like creating both the physical garment and creating in the digital space as well? You know, you're used to working with fabrics and materials, but here you're working digitally as well.
I mean, if I could describe it in one word, I'd say it was freeing. So the process started off in VR, in a VR workspace called Horizon Workrooms, and we had our initial meeting with myself, with Singh, who is founder of Extended Identity, which is the digital fashion company. And we sort of pitched around some ideas, and I'll be honest, my first idea was not as great as this.
Well, this is fantastic.
Thank you. So yeah, we sort of pitched around some ideas, and I went away and listened to some music, which that really sort of helped my creative process. I listened to the song Water by Kelani. I just had this vision in my mind's eye of a water deity rising up out of the water. So we used that and moved onto Graffiti Sketch, which is a VR creative workspace where you can collaborate with people from all over the world. So we made the dress initially on Graffiti Sketch, and one thing about it is, I'll put my hands up and say I'm not the best drawer, but with Graffiti Sketch we're able to sort of draw, create, mold shapes, and so we came up with this design on there, and then moved into making it into the physical realm.
So what are the biggest challenges designing a metaverse dress, if you like?
Obviously, the initial challenge is the barrier to entry, which is having a VR headset, and then you need stable and strong internet. But then after that, there's literally no barriers and no challenges that I found. Like I said, I'm not the best drawer, and it's such a great platform to have all different creative ideas on there, and you can create, literally have a thought, and then there is an app, there is a tool for it. There's such a wide range of colours, even colours that don't exist on the spectrum that you can mix.
Just up on the screen now, we just had your dress was up there, but we're seeing a variety of different dresses from the Queens of the Metaverse show now. And this really helps demonstrate that the rules of physics no longer apply when designing in this sort of space, do they?
Exactly. And that's the best thing about it, because it is a new world and a boundless space. You can create anything that you want, and you can apply anything that you want onto it as well.
When it comes to design, how important is representation?
I think without representation, the design is redundant. The design is just a carbon copy of stuff we've always seen, and it just doesn't spark creativity and interest. With representation, you can speak to different people's cultures. You can have different people who are not usually represented within sort of the mainstream, showcasing their design, showcasing their way of life, their culture, and parts of their existence which have not been explored usually.
Can you thrive as a purely digital designer? You know, are there going to be enough people out there that are willing to purchase entirely digital garments and fashion?
I think definitely. I think we've just seen in this year's London Fashion Week a lot of digital design taking up space. We saw initially, I think the first one that I was privy to was Hanifa in Fashion Week in 2020, creating a full digital fashion show. And I think there are companies coming up now, like Extended Identity, like I mentioned, in digital space. And I think it's such like a great space for brands as well to be able to, one, diversify your offering. If you're traditionally quite a safe brand and you want to do something cool and young and a little bit edgy, there's a new platform for you to try that. And it's a good place as well for brands to sponsor creatives and designers. So there's so much ways that initial companies and brands and even creatives can monetize their work and share their work. And it also offers like a platform for people to try new things as well, because again, it's not regulated, not as heavily regulated as being on TV or being on the internet. You can really create what you want.
This is absolutely incredible. Everybody, please, can you give it up for Noara Emenike and our fabulous model, his incredible creation.
Thank you.
We've given you plenty for the gram. We've given you plenty for the gram there. So are these virtual worlds, are they all going to be about community? Is that going to be the big thing?
I think community is going to be an absolutely essential part of the future. And whether that community is something, there are communities that come together around content too. I mean, I'm sure many of the shows that are represented in this room have communities that have grown up around them. But I think that it will be important for people to be able to experience some of these immersive, in our case, story experiences together, and with people that they may have an affinity with that they don't know. So there's lots of different dimensions to this, but I think this is absolutely a part of the future. And Mundi and I were talking about persistence. I think that's the other thing we're going to see, is this sense that there are persistent worlds. So even when you're not in there, it is continuing to unfold and to evolve. And that, I think, will also invite and inspire community.
Yeah. I mean, Jatin, what do you think about sort of online community? And
definitely think there's an opportunity. Now, we already build communities through our existing programming, through, as an example, Springwatch. We bring together quite a lot of interested individuals from across the UK and potentially world who are interested in birds and just observing how they evolve, what they do, and things like that. There's definitely an opportunity for us to reach more audiences through these virtual worlds where we are able to create communities around interest, communities around purpose. And I think this is becoming quite an important point, where at the moment the physical world doesn't allow us to reach those many audiences globally. Virtual world definitely opens up new opportunities.
Is the technology ready, though, to support those ideas? I mean, is it there yet?
Technology will never be ready. I think it's just about actually starting with something and exploring and developing, because that pushes the maturity of that technology as well. I mean, 10 years ago when we were talking about streaming technologies, it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
But we started with it, and that's the point about these technologies. The best thing that we can do is participate, understand, and help it mature so that it can reach those many people.
Mundi, what do you think? I mean, I'm fairly confident I know what you think about online communities.
Yeah, so of course everything we're building at Klang is all about exactly that, creating large communities and seeing how they can fuel each other forward. So I think it's hugely important because, I mean, one of the things that we've been seeing in our research is, this is probably something everyone's heard about, is this crazy loneliness epidemic that we're heading into, right? So people are not able to find new friends and socialize in the real world. So this might be an opportunity for people to find each other and connect. And yeah, so that could be huge for us as a species. Like loneliness is one of the most harmful things you could experience, and so that could be very positive.
But in essence, what we're talking about here is online society. A lot of this, it's how we experience our lives online, and anybody, regardless of age, background, race, is supposed to be able to enjoy and explore these spaces. How do we ensure that these are safe spaces for everyone?
very complicated.
Yeah, exactly. Who wants to go first?
Well, I think I can give a perspective. Certainly, the internet today and the Web 2.0 that we refer to, I think misses quite a lot of governance and policy angles that I think we have an opportunity to define them.
Well, it could be argued that the internet today is like opening a door to a room where there's thousands of people who are screaming they hate you. You know, I think that's a reasonable argument for a lot of people. That is their experience online.
Yeah, totally. And I think there needs to be more policy and governance and regulation around how these digital spaces are explored. There certainly needs to be protection for all sorts of different types of content, and certainly kids who are more and more exposed to these worlds. So we have an opportunity with the new internet, as we call it, Web 3.0, to define that from ground up, so that these are safe spaces that people can enjoy, learn, and participate.
Just on that, like I think like, you know, further government policy, I think is pretty clear. Like we have laws that, you know, ban you from online harassment, and that is illegal. It's the mere size of these and multitude of these communities that it becomes very hard to regulate. So I think there are two key things that need to be really strong in whatever approach you go for. One is that you give really good tools to the moderators of those communities to be able to self-regulate and police their own communities. And then secondly, there's a lot of very interesting developments in the field of AI that can kind of pick up and track harassment and toxicity across, you know, vast number of you know, text messages and such, and really point the developers in the direction of where that's happening, and even automatically address and adjust the communities depending on, you know, who's a griefer, who's toxic, and stuff like that.
Vicky, you know, when it comes to these kind of ideas for the ILM XLab and its associated partnerships and franchises, is this all a bit of the unknown? Is it a bit of the Wild West?
Well, I think it will definitely continue to evolve. And as I was saying earlier, I think it's really important that we do everything that we can to make this a safe and inclusive space. But we're not going to be able to control everything. Some of that is going to have to be done, as Jatin was saying, you know, in terms of the governance and the tools is actually a great point, which is how to invite people to help moderate those interactions. So I believe that there is more good than not, and therefore there will be an evolution that will embrace, you know, how do we make this a compelling, safe, inclusive experience for all.
When television came around, it was going to kill cinema. You know, that was the idea. The TV was going to kill cinema. It didn't kill cinema. Our relationship with cinema changed. When the internet became popularized, it was going to kill TV. It hasn't killed linear TV, but our relationship with linear TV has definitely changed. What about these ideas and notions of the metaverse? What does that mean for the linear TV experience, if you like? Jatin?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point. Again, self-regulation is one way of doing it, but we know that it doesn't actually work that much. I mean, you look at the broadcasting industry, we are regulated, right? And it is safe space. People trust it to come and consume the services and the content. There needs to be some hard choices around how we regulate and make sure that they are safe spaces. And I think the accountability is quite key. If accountability was federated around these ecosystems, then nobody's really accountable. I think there needs to be a central point of accountability about these new ecosystems. So yeah, I think the way we've gone through the broadcasting industry, now that there is a huge amount of trust, similar thing will need to happen, I would believe, in these new ecosystems, where there needs to be proper regulation, there needs to be proper accountability and policy to enable that.
Right, final question to all of you. What's the one piece of advice you could give to broadcasters when it comes to the metaverse? What is that one piece of advice? Vicky?
I think it's you have to have courage and be willing to take some risks and experiment to understand how this fits into your bigger portfolio and creative strategy.
Jatin?
Don't wait and observe.
Mundi?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, really know what you're after, like know which shelf, that I mentioned earlier you're going to go on, and then yeah, be patient and expect it to take time and a lot of money to get there.
And I think we've concluded as well that we need another phrase other than metaverse as well. I think that's one of the other things that we can take away from this. Sadly, we're out of time. It has been phenomenal spending time with all of you this afternoon. I'd like to thank our incredible panel. I'd like to thank you, our audience, and everybody watching online. Thank you very much, and please do hang around for the very next session. Thank you very much.